Before we dive into today's gripping story, we want to take a moment to appreciate you, our amazing subscribers, new viewers, and the incredible community that makes Moonlight Tales by Samsy so special. Your likes, shares, and thoughtful comments mean the world to us, and we're beyond grateful for your support. If this is your first time here, welcome. You're in for a ride filled with drama, suspense, and unexpected twists. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest stories. And of course, drop a comment below. We love hearing from you, and your support keeps us going. Now, sit back, relax, and let's dive right back into the story, because things are about to get even more intense. The motorcycle finally came to a halt in front of what looked like an abandoned construction site. It was quiet, too quiet. The air smelled of wet sand and something rotten. Sophie looked around with confusion and fear written all over her face. There were heaps of gravel scattered on the ground, overgrown bushes dancing in the wind, and rusty rods sticking out of what used to be a wall. The building looked like it had been forgotten by time. Some parts had no walls, and the roof? There was none. It was just a skeleton of cement blocks and broken dreams. She slowly got down from the bike, holding her small bag close to her chest. "Ray, are you sure this is where we're going to live?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ray nodded slowly, not meeting her eyes. "It's all I've got for now," he said. Sophie looked at the building again. Her chest tightened. She could barely breathe. Her feet felt heavy, and her heart pounded louder than the sound of the crickets chirping around them. "How do you expect us to live in such a terrible place?" she whispered. Ray didn't respond. He simply walked ahead, stepping over some broken planks and loose bricks. Sophie followed him hesitantly. When they entered the room, or what was left of it, her heart broke even more. There was no door. Just a curtain made of old cloth hanging loosely from a nail. Inside, there was only one thing, a very old, flat mattress that had stains and looked like it had been rescued from a trash heap. There were no windows, only open holes in the walls. Wind blew through them, carrying the smell from a dumping site nearby. It was a mix of rotting food, burnt plastic, and something else she couldn't name, but it stung her nose and made her stomach turn. She couldn't believe this was now her home. As the sun went down, the building grew darker and colder. The walls were cracked. There were spider webs in every corner. Sophie sat on the edge of the mattress, still wearing her wedding dress, which was nothing more than a torn, oversized white gown with frayed lace. Her hands were cold. She pulled her scarf tighter around her shoulders and looked around helplessly. There was no light. No water. No comfort. She missed her old bed, even if it was in the home of people who hated her. Suddenly, she felt a sting on her arm. Then another on her leg. She jumped and looked down. Mosquitoes. Lots of them. They buzzed around her like they had been waiting for fresh blood. She grabbed the same torn scarf she had used during her wedding and began chasing them away. But it was useless. More came. They wouldn't stop. Ray was already lying down. He had taken off his shirt and covered his face with it. He looked tired, like someone who had seen too many hard days. In a matter of minutes, he was asleep. But Sophie couldn't close her eyes. The mattress itched. It smelled. She kept hearing tiny sounds: scratching, squeaking, crawling. Her eyes darted around in fear. Then she saw one. A rat. Not just any rat. It was big. Bigger than any rat she had ever seen. Its eyes shone in the dark like tiny flashlights. It didn't run away when she waved her hand. It stared right back at her like it wasn't afraid of her at all. She grabbed a stick nearby and hit it against the floor. It didn't flinch. Another one crawled out from the corner. And then another. Sophie screamed quietly and moved to the edge of the mattress. She didn't know where to go. She had nowhere else. This was it. This was home. The smell from the dumping site got worse as the night got colder. It felt like the wind was blowing the filth right into their room. Sophie used the scarf to cover her nose, but it didn't help. Her eyes watered. She felt sick. She sat curled up in a ball, knees to her chest, silently wiping the tears that rolled down her cheeks. Her body itched from the mosquito bites, and every few minutes, she slapped her arms or legs, trying to kill them. She didn't even notice when she finally dozed off, but it wasn't sleep, it was more like passing out from exhaustion. When she woke up, the sun was already peeking through the wall openings. Her body ached all over. She stretched her legs and winced. There were bite marks on her feet, tiny, bloody holes left by the rats. Her ankle had swollen slightly, and her skin was red and irritated. The mattress had even more stains now, this time from her blood and the crushed mosquitoes she had squashed in the night. She turned to look at Ray. He was still asleep, breathing heavily. How could he sleep in a place like this? How had he managed to live here for this long? She slowly stood up and stepped outside. The early morning light revealed even more of the horror. The bushes around the building were so tall they could hide someone. The dumping site next door had flies flying in clouds. Sophie held her stomach and tried not to throw up. She stood there for a while, staring at nothing. She didn't even realize that she had started crying again. The tears rolled down quietly. She wasn't just crying because of the building or the rats or the smell. She was crying because this wasn't the life she dreamed of. This wasn't how her story was supposed to go. She had already endured so much, being treated like trash by her foster parents, being married off like a property, and now this. A house with no roof. No safety. No hope. She wiped her tears and took a deep breath. She had no choice. This was her life now. The first few weeks after Sophie and Ray moved into the abandoned building were the hardest days of their lives. Every day felt like a battle against hunger, sickness, hopelessness, and fear. The building had no doors, no proper walls, and no roof. At night, the cold wind would blow in and Sophie would shiver under the thin cloth they used as a blanket. Ray would hold her tightly, trying to warm her up, but they both knew that wasn't enough. They didn't have much to eat. Sometimes it was just a small bowl of rice, other times they only drank water to fill their stomachs. Ray went out every morning to look for jobs at construction sites. Most times, he didn't get picked, but when he was lucky, he'd get to carry blocks or mix cement. He got paid only a little, just enough for one meal for both of them. Sophie didn't want to sit at home doing nothing, so she began to ask around if anyone needed help cleaning or washing clothes. At first, people mocked her. They saw her and said, "Look at the poor girl living in that dirty place. Who would want her to clean their home?" Their words hurt, but Sophie didn't give up. She knew she had to do something. She couldn't bear watching Ray work so hard alone, especially when he came home every evening with his hands blistered and his face covered in dust. One day, while walking past a small private school nearby, she saw a woman sweeping the front steps. Sophie walked up to her and politely asked if they needed any help. The woman looked at her from head to toe, then asked, "Do you know how to clean toilets?" Sophie nodded quickly, "Yes, Ma, I can clean anything." The next day, she started working there as a cleaner. It wasn't easy. She had to wake up very early to get to the school before the pupils arrived. She scrubbed floors, cleaned toilets, emptied bins, and washed the windows. Her hands became rough and her back ached badly, but at least she could bring back a little money. It wasn't much, but it helped them eat a little better. As weeks passed, they made small changes to the building. Ray got some planks from a site and used them to cover the window holes. They bought a mat to sleep on so they could finally throw away the old, torn mattress. Sophie even managed to buy a small second-hand mosquito net from the market to keep the mosquitoes away at night. The rats still came sometimes, but Ray blocked most of the holes with stones and pieces of metal. Even though things were still tough, Sophie and Ray were beginning to smile a little. They sat together some evenings, telling stories and laughing quietly, trying to forget all their problems. They were still poor, still struggling, but at least they had each other. And in that moment, that was enough. Then something strange started happening. Sophie began to feel very tired, even after just a few hours of work. At first, she thought she was just overworking herself. But then, she started feeling sick in the mornings. She would run out of the building to throw up, and her body always felt hot and weak. Sometimes she would get irritated by the smallest things like the smell of Ray's sweaty clothes or the taste of the food they normally ate. One morning, after cleaning the school bathroom, Sophie felt very dizzy. She sat on a low bench, holding her stomach, and the head teacher walked by. She looked at Sophie and said, "You don't look too well, dear. Are you all right?" Sophie tried to smile and nodded, but deep inside, she knew something was not right. After work, she walked to a local pharmacy nearby. The pharmacist was a kind older woman who listened to her symptoms and smiled softly. "You might be pregnant," she said. Sophie's eyes widened. "Pregnant? But how?" The woman chuckled gently and told her to buy a pregnancy test strip and use it at home. That evening, Sophie waited for Ray to fall asleep before she quietly took the test. Her hands shook as she followed the instructions. A few minutes later, the result came out. 2 lines. Positive. She stared at it for a long time, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. The next morning, she told Ray. He had just come back from a site and was drinking water when she sat beside him, holding the test strip in her hand. "Ray," she said softly, "I'm pregnant." Ray choked on the water, then looked at her, stunned. "What?" She showed him the strip and repeated it. "I'm pregnant." Suddenly, Ray jumped up and lifted her in the air. "Oh my God! Sophie! We're going to have a baby! A baby!" He was smiling from ear to ear, and he didn't know when he started crying. He kissed her forehead and hugged her tightly. But Sophie didn't smile. When Ray put her down, he noticed her face. She looked worried, sad, even scared. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Aren't you happy?" Sophie looked into his eyes, her voice breaking as she said, "Ray, we can't even feed ourselves. How are we going to take care of a baby? Look at where we live. It's not safe, not clean, not good enough for a child. We don't even have steady jobs. I clean toilets, you carry blocks, and the money we get is barely enough for us." Tears rolled down her cheeks. Ray didn't know what to say at first. He wiped her tears and held her hands. "I know," he said, "I know things are hard. But we'll figure it out. This baby is a blessing. We didn't plan for it, but maybe this is the beginning of something good. Please don't cry. I promise, I'll work even harder. We'll make it work, together." Sophie looked away. Her heart was heavy, not just because of the baby, but because deep inside, she was scared. Scared that the child might suffer like she did. Scared that history would repeat itself. Ray pulled her close and rested his head on her shoulder. In that quiet moment, they didn't have answers. But they had each other. And somehow, that gave them a little hope. That night, after Ray found out Sophie was pregnant, he couldn't sleep. He lay beside her on the mat, staring at the holes in the wooden planks above them that acted as a roof. The wind whispered through the gaps, and far away, dogs barked and rats scurried around. But all Ray could hear was Sophie's voice in his head, saying, "How are we going to raise a baby in this place?" He turned and looked at her. Her back was to him. He could tell she wasn't asleep either. "Sophie," he whispered, gently touching her shoulder. "Are you awake?" She slowly turned around to face him. Her eyes were red and tired. "I can't sleep," she said. "Me too," Ray replied softly. "I've been thinking." They lay facing each other in the dim light of the small lantern they kept beside the mat. It flickered, casting weak shadows on the cracked walls. "I know you're scared," Ray said, "and you have every right to be." "I'm scared too." Sophie looked at him, her eyes welling up again. "I don't even know why I'm crying so much," she said with a weak smile. "Maybe it's the baby, or maybe I'm just tired. Tired of struggling, tired of hoping, tired of pretending I'm okay." Ray gently wiped the tears from her face. "You don't have to pretend around me," he said. "I know this life isn't what you imagined. You never asked for this." "I didn't," Sophie said quietly, "but I didn't ask for the other life either. Being treated like a burden by my foster parents. Being married off like I was some extra luggage they wanted to drop. But at least there was food, and a roof. This place," she looked around and sighed, "Ray, this place is not for a child." Ray nodded. He knew she was right. The leaking roof, the mosquitoes, the rats, the smell from the dumping site nearby, it was no place for a baby. Or anyone, really. "I see the way you work," Sophie continued, "coming home with wounds on your hands, your body aching. And yet, we still go to bed hungry sometimes. Now there's going to be another mouth to feed." Ray didn't say anything. He just listened. "I don't even have proper clothes for myself," Sophie said, her voice cracking. "How do I buy diapers? Baby clothes? Food? What happens when I get sick during the pregnancy? Or if the baby gets sick?" Ray took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about all that too," he said. "And you're right, things are bad. But you know what else? We've survived everything they threw at us. Your foster parents threw you away, and you didn't break. I came out of prison with nothing, and yet here we are, still standing." "But barely," Sophie whispered. Ray held her hand. "Yes. Barely. But still, together. And now we have a reason to fight harder. I won't lie to you and say it'll be easy, because it won't. It's going to be really, really hard. But I want this baby. Not because it will magically fix everything, but because it gives me hope." Sophie looked at him, confused. "Hope?" Ray nodded. "Yes. Hope that maybe life isn't done with us yet. Maybe this child will bring something new. Maybe this child is the reason we keep going." "But how?" she asked softly. "How do we keep going when it feels like the world has already given up on us?" Ray sat up and looked around the small room. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I believe we will. I'll find more work, I'll carry bricks all day if I have to. I'll beg, clean gutters, anything. I just need you to promise me one thing." "What?" Sophie asked. "Promise me you won't give up," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Promise me you won't shut me out, no matter how hard things get." Sophie sat up slowly too, facing him. Her face looked tired, but her eyes held something new, something soft. "I don't want to give up," she said. I need to know we're not alone." "We're not," Ray said quickly. "We have each other." There was a long pause. Then Sophie said, "If this baby is truly a blessing, I want to believe it too. But Ray, I need you to be honest with me from now on. No more hiding things. No more pretending everything's okay when it's not." Ray nodded. "I promise." They sat there in silence for a while, just holding hands. Outside, the wind picked up and blew against the walls, making the wood creak. But inside, something shifted. For the first time in a long while, they didn't feel completely lost. Sophie leaned her head on Ray's shoulder. "I'm scared," she whispered again. "So am I," Ray whispered back. "But we'll walk through the fear together." He placed his hand gently on her stomach. It was still flat, still too early to tell. But in that moment, they both imagined a tiny heartbeat. A tiny life. Hope, wrapped in fear. Life, born in suffering. But still, life. It was a hot afternoon. The sun was high in the sky, and the air felt thick. Sophie had gone to her cleaning job earlier that day, but she returned home early, feeling weak and tired. Ray had just finished washing his dusty work shirt and hung it outside on a wire they had tied between two sticks. His shirt was already beginning to tear in several places, but it was all he had. Inside their small, unfinished home, there was silence except for the occasional buzzing of flies and the distant voices of children playing on the street. Ray was sitting on a broken stool, thinking about what to cook that evening. They had a few spoons of Gary left, but no sugar. Just as he reached for the plastic cup to fetch water from their container, his phone buzzed. It vibrated weakly, falling to the floor with a soft thud. The screen flickered for a second before showing the caller's name, Dave Lawyer. Ray's heart skipped a beat. Dave had been the lawyer who tried to help him during his trial. He was the only person who believed he was innocent. After the court wrongly declared him guilty, Dave had promised to keep digging, but Ray never thought he would hear from him again, especially not now. Ray picked up the phone quickly, but the buttons were faulty. It took him several tries to answer the call. "Hello? Hello? Dave?" Ray said, his voice shaky and filled with confusion. "Ray! Finally! I've been trying to reach you," Dave's voice came through loud and clear. Ray stood up straight. I'm sorry. My phone's not good. What's going on?" Dave paused for a moment before speaking again. His voice became serious. "Ray, I have good news. The best news, actually. We finally found the man who committed the murder. The real killer. He's been caught. He confessed to everything. You were innocent all along, and now, we have proof." Ray froze. He couldn't speak. It felt like the whole world had stopped moving. His heart beat faster, and his palms became sweaty. "What?" he whispered. Are you serious?" "Yes, Ray," Dave replied firmly. "It's all true. The police reopened the case last month. Someone came forward with a video recording. It showed the actual killer at the scene of the crime. You were not even close to the place when it happened." Ray felt weak in the knees and sat down on the stool again. He grabbed his chest like he couldn't breathe. For years, he had carried the shame, the pain, the label of ex-convict like a heavy chain. And now, just like that, someone had finally cleared his name. "But that's not all," Dave continued. "I've filed a lawsuit. We're going after the police department and the judge who handled your case. We're suing them for wrongful imprisonment, emotional distress, lost income, and damages." Ray blinked, still not understanding fully. "How much?" he asked slowly. Dave took a deep breath and replied, $10 million, Ray. You could get up to $10 million in compensation. It might take a few months, but the case is strong. You're finally going to get justice." Ray's eyes widened. His mouth dropped open. He stood up again, pacing back and forth in their tiny room. $10 million, he repeated. "Me?" "Yes, you," Dave said, laughing a little at Ray's shock. "You deserve every penny. They took years from your life. They stole your freedom. But now, the truth is out." Ray couldn't hold it in anymore. he shouted. Jesus! Thank you, Jesus! He ran outside barefoot, hands in the air. $10 million. 10 million. Neighbors nearby turned to look at him, confused, but he didn't care. He laughed like a madman. He rolled on the ground, jumped, and screamed again. Sophie! Sophie has to hear this, he said to himself. She'll cry from happiness. He tried calling her, but her phone didn't go through. He called again. Still nothing. That's strange, he said, but he didn't let it bother him. Maybe she's busy cleaning. He couldn't wait to run home and tell her face to face. Back in the room, he danced and laughed by himself. He imagined the life they would finally live, no more sleeping on the floor, no more rats or mosquitoes, no more hunger. They would get a real home. Sophie would get proper care for her pregnancy. They could buy baby clothes, toys, everything they never had. Ray's eyes welled up with tears. He had cried before, but always from pain. This time, he was crying from joy. Pure joy. He grabbed the old bag they used for shopping and stuffed it with his torn shirt and a few pieces of bread he had saved. I'm going to Dave's house, he said to himself. I need to hear it again. Face to face. He left a note on the wall for Sophie, just in case she returned while he was gone. Baby, I have amazing news. I'll be back soon. Please stay safe. Love you always, Ray. He ran out, barefoot, ignoring the sharp stones and dusty road. By the time he reached Dave's place, he was already out of breath but full of hope. Dave welcomed him with a wide smile and gave him all the documents to look through. This is real, Ray, he said again. Your life is about to change forever. Ray couldn't stop crying. He hugged Dave tightly. Thank you, he said, voice shaking. Thank you for not giving up on me. When he finally left, Ray could barely feel the ground beneath his feet. His mind raced with plans, buying a house, opening a small business, getting Sophie into a real hospital. He held his phone and tried calling Sophie again. No answer. Maybe she's sleeping, he said, still smiling. She'll be shocked when I tell her. He didn't know that at that very moment, back home, Sophie was in pain. Bleeding. Crying. But for now, Ray only felt one thing: hope. For the first time in years, the sun didn't just shine. It lit a new path, and Ray was ready to walk it. But while Ray was out dreaming of a better life, something terrible was about to happen at home. When Sophie got back home, she was so tired and uncomfortable due to her early stages of pregnancy. Sophie was lying on the old mat, trying to get some sleep. The air was hot and still. Mosquitoes buzzed around her head. The smell from the dump site nearby filled the room. Suddenly, she heard footsteps. Not just one pair, many. Fast, heavy steps. And then, banging on the wooden door. Bang! 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 Sophie sat up, heart beating fast. She didn't know who it was. She thought maybe it was a neighbor. But then she heard deep, angry voices shouting Ray's name. Where is Ray? He better come out now. Her eyes widened in fear. Her hands began to shake. She crawled toward the back of the house and slipped out quietly. She tried to hide behind a stack of old planks and rusty metal at the backyard. Her heart was thumping so loud she feared they would hear it. But they found her. Two big men dragged her out roughly. Their hands were rough like sandpaper. One of them had a scar that ran across his face. He looked mean and dangerous. He stood in front of her, breathing heavily. Where is Ray? He growled. Sophie's lips trembled. I don't know where he is. He went out early, please, he didn't tell me. The man with the scar, who seemed to be the leader, clenched his fists. He owes us money. And if he thinks he can hide, we'll teach him a lesson through you." "No, please," Sophie cried. "We'll pay. I promise. Please don't hurt me." But they didn't listen. They hit her. Again and again. Her head spun. Her body screamed in pain. She fell to the ground, her arms trying to protect her belly. One of the thugs kicked her hard in the stomach. Sophie let out a loud, painful scream. Tears poured down her face. Her clothes were torn. Her face was swollen. Blood ran down her nose. Her whole body felt like it was on fire. Scar knelt beside her. "This is just the beginning," he hissed. "Next time, if we don't get our money, we'll come back and finish what we started." Then they left. Just like that. Like she wasn't even human. Sophie laid on the cold, dirty floor. She couldn't move. Her stomach hurt so badly. She knew something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. She whispered, "My baby, oh no, my baby." Blood soaked her clothes. The baby she had just started to feel inside her was gone. Sophie cried. She cried like she never had before. She screamed, but no one heard. Her voice echoed in the empty, broken building. Hours passed. Finally, Ray returned. He walked fast, holding his breath, barely able to keep the excitement in. He had just heard the best news of his life. He was finally free, and justice was being served. The man who committed the crime he was blamed for had been caught. And now, he was going to receive $10 million. He couldn't wait to tell Sophie. He imagined her jumping into his arms, both of them laughing, maybe even planning to move to a better place the very next day. But as he stepped into the building, he froze. "Sophie?" Silence. Then he saw her. She was lying on the ground, her body still, blood everywhere. Her eyes were barely open. "Sophie!" Ray screamed. He dropped to his knees beside her and shook her gently. "What happened? Who did this to you? Oh my God! Sophie, please, say something." She opened her mouth slowly, her lips dry and cracked. "They came, looking for you, they beat me. Ray, I lost the baby." Ray's heart shattered into pieces. He grabbed her hand tightly, tears falling from his eyes. He couldn't breathe. It felt like the whole world had stopped. "No, no, no, this can't be happening," he cried. "Why did I leave you alone? Why didn't I protect you?" Sophie turned her face away, crying softly. "Why does this keep happening to me, Ray? Why is my life full of pain? I thought the worst was over when I left my foster parents, but every time I think things will get better, something worse happens." Ray held her close, even though she winced in pain. He whispered, "I'm so sorry, it's my fault. I should have told you about them. I should have paid them. I should have protected you." He looked at her bruises, her swollen face, and the sadness in her eyes. He felt like the worst man in the world. He had let down the only person who ever stood by him. Sophie didn't say a word. She just stared at the ceiling, lost in her pain. Ray sat there for a long time, holding her as she cried. His dreams of joy, of telling her about the money, felt meaningless now. What was the point of having millions when the person you love is broken inside? He swore to himself, right there, that he would never let her suffer again. He would protect her. He would fight for her. And no one, no matter how scary or dangerous, would ever touch her again.